دعوني للسهاد وللشجون وللذكرى الجميلة أسلموني دعوني للسهاد وللشجون.
الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I just want to say Jazakumullah khair to all of you for taking the time out this evening to spend the evening with us. This is some of the presentations that we have today. My name is Asma Qureshi, the Executive Director at the NGO Cageprisoners. And Cageprisoners exists really to help people who have been detained or abused as part of this so-called war on terror. And we've been around since October 2007. And alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us to be able to continue our work up until this day. Now, before we go into the main talks, I just want to give a little background as to why this event is taking place, what its importance is. So, this really, although the war on terror starts really with 9/11, we decided to do this event specifically about the Horn of Africa for a reason. And that reason stems from, as early as 2005 with the failed 21st July bombings, and some of the brothers from that being from the Horn of Africa community, from the Somali community. But when it really became a major issue, sorry, let me just move this back, was in the end of 2006, when you had, I think it was the 30th of December 2006, you had Ethiopia starting its campaign against Somalia, specifically against the Union of Islamic Courts, who had established a de facto government in Somalia, had brought a little bit of stability to Somalia for the first time in decades. And you had the shelling of Mogadishu as the first step of that. Now, it's important to bear in mind that since 2003, the Americans had a base in Djibouti called com-munities, where 3,000 American soldiers were based. Now, a lot of the training and the equipping that happened of the Ethiopian army before they invaded Somalia was actually a direct result of the American help, American support, American financing and equipping from com-munities. Hence the reason why the Ethiopians were able to so successfully carry out their campaign against Somalia, and so quickly as well. It was only a matter of weeks before the Union of Islamic Courts were deposed, and the Ethiopians and the transitional federal government had taken control of Somalia. So from there, really what you had was the genesis of counterterrorism operations within the region. You'll often hear statements from the US, coming out of the US and even the UK now, that the Horn of Africa, particularly in Somalia, is the new troubled region in the war on terror. That's where people need to be worried about. That's where we need to concentrate our efforts to make sure that international terrorism, doesn't take place. So it's this kind of emphasis, trying to bring everything in together. So whether it's Afghanistan, or it's Pakistan, or it's Yemen, or the Horn of Africa, they try to conflate everything into becoming the same thing. So what you had coming up from the back of this aggression, this war against the Somali people by the Ethiopians, was the detention and rendition of many individuals. I mean, we're talking into the hundreds now, and possibly into the thousands, because NGOs haven't been able to get into Somalia, particularly into Mogadishu. We don't really know the exact numbers right now, but I can tell you of some of the cases that I know of. So in March of 2007, I traveled to the Horn of Africa, specifically to Kenya, in order to do some research, some field work regarding what was taking place in the region. And what we found was that refugees who are fleeing from Somalia into Kenya They were being detained in Kenya. They're being interrogated by the FBI, by MI5, by other security agencies from around the world, by the Kenyan authorities. And then they were being put back onto flights to Somalia. And then from there they were sent on to Ethiopia. And when they were in Ethiopia, they were kept inside these chicken wire cages and really held like animals. Very, very similar to the kinds of cages that we saw in the early days of Guantanamo Bay. So, I mean, that was really just the start of the operations. And what it led to was the profiling of an entire community. Because after that, it became, for many Western governments, when their security agencies were acting, they'd look at somebody, they'd say, okay, you look Somali. Okay, who do you know in the Shabaab? Tell me now, who do you know in the Shabaab? Who do you know in Al-Qaeda? Who do you know in Al-Qaeda in Kenya, in Tanzania, in Somalia, in the whole of the region? Who do you know? People getting picked up left, right and center without any kind of real scrutiny. And from this community itself, we know of the cases of a few brothers who kept on getting stopped at airports, and every time they were stopped, it was the same questions over and over again. Where are you from in Somalia? You know, who do you know in the Shabaab? Who do you know in Al-Qaeda? These guys have got nothing to do with anything related to international terrorism. And yet, simply because they came from a Somali background, it was assumed that somehow these people must have been responsible for international terrorism, or must be somehow involved in it. Now, last week, Cageprisoners launched a report. It was called the Horn of Africa Inquisition. If you haven't picked up a copy, there's some free copies outside. And essentially what we wanted to do was present some case studies from the last few years of individuals, particularly those from the Somali community, but also some people who were traveling to the Horn of Africa, what happened to them. And what we present within the context of the report is the same thing every single time. That being Somali, being from the Horn of Africa, is in itself reason enough now to be criminalised, to somehow be suspected of being involved in international terrorism. And the reason why we've chosen to do this event here within this community is so that we can start raising and highlighting some of the abuses that are taking place, so that the community itself is aware of what is going on, and then further than that, what your rights are. Because often what happens is that MI5 will come to an individual and say, you know, if you don't work with us, if you don't help us, then we won't let you travel, or we won't let you do this, or we won't let you do that. So they try and put pressure on you in different ways, and inshallah what we're hoping to do is maybe give you some confidence to say that, well no, we're not going to be pressured into doing that simply because you want to use fear against us. You know, we're strong enough, we're decent citizens of this country, you know, we have no reason to be scared. So, to start off the presentations, inshallah, I have to my left Muazzam Beg, who is a former Guantanamo detainee and also the director of Cageprisoners, and inshallah he'll give a brief presentation on his own experiences and also in relation to this issue, inshallah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Allahumma la sahla illa ma ja'altuhu sahla wa anta taj'al al-huzna idha shi'ta sahla. Brothers and sisters, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We saw in the presentation about Cageprisoners the different types of people that have been affected in the war on terror, and particularly the detentions process. If you take a country, if you take a place like Guantanamo Bay, for example, which is the most well-known prison that's run by the Americans, people have been rendered from 48 different countries on the globe to this prison camp. People from Europe, people from Asia, people from Africa, and there's one single common denominator, one thing that makes everyone the same, that they're all Muslim. Every single person held in Guantanamo is a Muslim, whether he's a Turkish Muslim or a Danish Muslim, whether he's a Pakistani Muslim or a Somali Muslim, whether he's Arab or whether he's Persian or Farsi. It doesn't make any difference. That's the one common factor. Every single prison